Rev up your engines!
Sean M says, Scotty, are you ever going to auction off your Toyota Celica? Well, I'm not, but my son told me the other day, says, when you conk out, he says, I'll auction that Celica off. Who knows how much money I can get for Scotty Celica, the famous Celica, right? So, if you see it up for auction, it would mean that I probably conked out, and then I have no control over any of the stuff, so it really doesn't matter. But truthfully, I'm hoping that there'll be somebody out there that will have a conversion kit to turn it into an electric car. Because after all, that 94 Celica, it's basically a Toyota Corolla with a nicer body and a better suspension system. Same engine, transmission, brakes, all that stuff. It's got drums in the back, just like a Corolla does. And if somebody comes out with an electric conversion kit, I'd love them to send it to me and I would convert it to an electric car. Be kind of fun. Why throw away a good car? And if they're going to electrification, hey, everything else on that thing works, the steering, the suspension, what the heck? Turn it into an electric car. They're already doing it in Europe. For like 5,000 euros, they got kits to do other cars like Volkswagens, Fiats, and stuff. If people really do come out with kits for electric cars, you know they're going to make one for a Toyota Corolla setup, and that's basically that. And it's even better than a Corolla because it's a hatchback, and you can put the batteries in the back. If anybody does come up with one, feel free to send me it. You'll get all kinds of free PR. I'll put it in the car, show people the kits that are out there, and then I'd end up with a little electric Celica. Be a lot faster, too. All right, Ford has unveiled a new off-road expedition called the Timberline. Well, I find that rather hilarious myself because I have many customers with expeditions. None of them ever took them off-road. But it's got increased ground clearance, heavy-duty skid pan in case you run over something. I mean, my customers who buy these things buy them to move their family around. Soccer moms have them. They don't really take them off-road. And it's going to have that 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine, the one that's notorious for having problems, with 440 horsepower out of a little bitty 6-cylinder engine with dual turbos on them. The thing about the old Expeditions were they had V8 engines, and they could run quite some time. They did have a lot of electronic problems as they aged. The engines are solid. Now you're going for a problematic 3.5-liter dual turbo V6. I don't think that's a smart move, especially off-road. And it has that blue cruise system that Ford has. It says it allows hand-free operation with an infrared camera system. They didn't mention if it tracks off-road stuff. I'm sure that most of it is just regular roads and highways, right? Now, these are all assembled in Louisville, Kentucky. Of course, the parts come from all over the world. I laughed my butt off. I did a video with the new F-150, and it showed that 40% of the parts came from Canada and the United States, and then certain parts came from Mexico, and then the other ones don't even tell you where they come from. When they say assembled, that's what they mean. They're put together. The parts come from all over the world. Now, they didn't mention the pricing, but since it's going to be the fancy off-road one, and the high-end one today is $75,000. I'm sure it's going to be $75,000 or above if you plan on going off-road in one of these things. Tiago says, what do you think of a 2.0 Toyota hybrid? As I've stated many times, I'm not really a hybrid fan myself because I have to fix these things, right? And when they break, they are so freaking complex. You got a gasoline engine. You have an electric motor. They are turned on and off at various times by computers, with sensors, with software. When they wear out, they cost a fortune. And I'm a cheapskate. I'll never buy a new car. I'm too cheap. I always buy used cars. I buy them cheap and drive them for 20 or 30 years more, right? You can't do that with a hybrid. You buy a 15-year-old hybrid, the battery goes out. Some of those are $10,000, $12,000. On a Toyota Prius, if the generator goes out, they don't have alternators, they have generators. That's like a $6,000 up job because it's part of the transfer case. You got to replace the whole transmission, pulling the engine and tranny out. So $6,000 something later, I would not buy one. But if you're talking about buying a new one, they do last quite some time. I've seen them with a couple 100,000 miles and they were pretty much trouble-free. But don't buy one that has a couple 100,000 miles. I know you're asking for trouble. Reckless Photography says, what are the common issues with the 2002 Nissan Xterra Supercharger? Superchargers spin air. They're like a turbocharger, only instead of running off your exhaust gas, which is more efficient, they run off a belt that runs off the engine, so it actually steals some of the energy of the engine. It gives extra energy, but it steals some of it back running itself. If it's a 2002, let me tell you, it might have gone through the washing machine. It's a 20-year-old vehicle. If you're thinking about buying one, you want to really check them out like mad with a mechanic like me who can scan everything and see if there's a problem, if there isn't a problem. And I wouldn't overpay. Realize a Nissan Xterra that's 20 years old goes for peanut money. I had a guy here buy one the other day for $1,200. They don't go for much money, but if they still ran and shifted okay, could be a good knock-around car, especially with the supercharger, zoom it around. But you'd want a mechanic to check out. If he says the supercharger's breaking down, they cost a fortune. Nobody fixes them. They just replace them. Rob says, Scotty, would you pick a Toyota CHR or a Honda Civic? Well, they're both so upgraded. That's a very good question. Customer here brought me a brand new Toyota CHR, and I was impressed by what it looked and how it performed and that price range. But on the other hand, I had another customer bring a brand new Civic, and it was beautiful looking because they're taking a lot of the styles of the new Civics, the cheaper ones, from the Civic Type R that are the super expensive racing Civics. They're very good looking cars. Of course, I'm a Toyota guy and I'm cheap. They tend to last a little bit longer, so I'd probably get the Toyota. But they're both really evolved vehicles. Nathan Freeland says, Scotty, what do you think of a 2002 F-150 Triton V8 Lariat two-wheel drive? Should I trade it or sell it in the marketplace for an older Chevy? The Ford only has 18,000 miles. It was my grandpa's. Well, that's a very good truck. But if you want an older Chevy, with the market the way it is, even though it's a 20-year-old Ford, if it's Grandpa's car, you can actually prove it only has 18,000 miles. Put it on the auction market. See what people are going to offer. You might get a whole bunch of money for that. I met a soldier down the street the other day when I was road testing a truck. He had bought a big Ford diesel truck for $30,000, like 9 months ago. He just sold it for $45,000. The prices of stuff has gone up so high. If you get a bunch for that and you want an old Chevy truck, go ahead. My advice is stick from like the 70s. The latest I'd go would be like, really? 95, 96. You could put it up to 99, but those old ones, you can fix them forever. The parts are readily available. They were better made. So try the market. See what's out there. I've seen absurd things happen. My son in Boston, he had a RAV4. He had it for like 4 years. He traded it in. And they don't usually give you that much on a trade-in. He got more for that trade-in than he paid for it 4 years ago. I did buy a new Sienna because they got 3 kids now and he needed all the seating for the baby seats. But he got that much more money 4 or 5 years later from when he paid for it from a dealer trade-in. So you can wheel and deal for a while now. Paul C says, does steam clean carbon buildup in a GDI engine or other chemical products work better? It would have to be extremely high pressure steam because the carbon builds up. If you've ever seen the inside of a Volkswagen GDI, you take the intake off. Sometimes the carbon is this thick. And the only thing that'll take it off, using a sandblaster, but you can't use sand, that would destroy the engine inside. You use a sandblaster machine, but you use walnut shells, because walnut shells are hard enough. They're not the big shells, of course. They're all broken down to little pieces. They'll clean that carbon off and they won't damage the engine. But if you have a lighter deposit, the best thing that I have ever found are these crazy guys that I know in New Mexico. And it's called Test Solutions, ATS. They came out with a brand new cleaning setup. One of them goes in your engine oil. One of them goes in your tank. They're completely different cleaners. $1 million in 8 years figuring out which chemicals get rid of which carbon. They found one chemical works for the oil-based stuff in your engine oil, and the other one works for the fuel that comes to the fuel system. And you use both of those. They also have a very fancy cleaning machine that mechanics use that uses those chemicals, but it does it with a computer setup, spraying some of it into the intake, some of it in the injectors. It's a very complex system, but it works really well. If you really have a gunked up engine, my advice is find a guy who's got one of their ATS machines and pay him to run it through. It takes maybe a couple hours to do it. That might get a lot of it out. Or if you want to try their in-tank stuff, just check out ATS on the internet. They got a big website and you can see all the stuff that they have. That seems to be the best cleaner I have ever seen so far because they claim that their stuff doesn't have any PEA. And all the other guys say, use PEA, use PEA. Well, they studied everything and they claim what they found is better than PEA by doing all this research in New Mexico. You know, Los Alamos, Sandia National Laboratories, there's a lot of high-tech stuff there. So they took advantage of the high technology. And they came up with a cleaner that I tried it out so far. I'm amazed by the stuff. I put it in a Volkswagen, and after running it 15 minutes, changing the oil, and putting new oil in, that engine was so much quieter because it can clean the timing chain tensioner so it tightens it up more. If your oil control rings are getting stuck in because they're low tension, all the new cars, when the oil gets dirty, they can stick in the pistons and not release, and then they burn more oil. This cleans it and frees them out. So there's some amazing technology people are working on these days. What about lowriders? Lowriders are a cultural phenomenon. Started mainly with the Hispanic community. They decided they're going to make their own lowriders, right? So they make them real low. They put those funky electric suspension systems systems and big bass in them. You can see the windows rattle when they're playing. It's a cultural thing. Now, as an actual driving car, they're absurd because they're so low to the ground. They'll scrape when you go for speed bumps. And of course, they ride like crap. The lower a vehicle is, the worse it's going to ride. They're for show. And then they have those leaping contests. I've been to a couple of them. They're rather entertaining. Sometimes they can get those things to jump 3 feet up in the air. So it's kind of entertaining watching these things jump up. Being a cultural phenomenon, man, some of these guys in Houston, they put over $100 grand into these old cars. And they were just, rolling works of art going down the road. They're very interesting. They're not everyday drivers. Come on now. That's only common sense because they're too low to the ground. It's like those guys that get a pickup truck and then they lower them. It's like, okay, you want a cool lowered pickup truck for show, but it's a pickup truck. You're not going to be able to pull stuff. You're not going to be able to put stuff in a bed. Trucks ride bad enough anyways. You make a lowrider truck, it's going to ride even worse. But they're interesting showpieces. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.